Dean. Paul is going to be talking about picking up the pieces, building story in a roguelike world. Paul's a Nebula-nominated writer and Emmy-nominated game designer with about 2 decades of experience in games. Everything from an enormous amount of journalism and critical commentary to designing tabletop role-playing games to critically acclaimed writing and narrative design, including on Pacific Drive. And I'm really excited to hear this talk. Thank you so much,
Wow.
Paul. Take it away.
What a very nice intro. Thank you so much. Right. I think this means that I have to just get going right now. Hello, everyone. The intro has actually taken the wind out of my own intro, but hello, my name is Paul, and this is Picking Up the Pieces, Building Story in a Roguelike World. And this is a picture of me when I was 6. And this is a picture of me taken this week. Now, it would be a lie to say that the connection between the two has been a largely linear progression, at least in terms of narrative, because the fact is that most or all the things you think you know about linear narrative are a lie, or if not a lie, a blatant misrepresentation or a gross exaggeration. That's a big claim. But you see, what I'm supposed to do in any narrative presentation about video games is talk about how the medium is so special, how all the stuff that we make is different to films and comics and any other medium, and that the player isn't as passive, that things don't unfold in the same linear fashion. Maybe I will then cite some kind of exception, like Final Fantasy game books that proto-hyperlink you back and forth through hundreds of numbered paragraphs, and which you may have save scummed as a kid by holding your place with your finger so that you can jump back in time to avoid certain death. I've done this style of talk loads of times in the past, but I don't think that's actually as good an idea this time. And frankly, I don't want to. Also, our hosts were interested in me talking a little bit about the writing process itself, at least in this context, or at least my writing process. So let's also do that. But this is the roguelike celebration. So let's start everything all over again. My name is Paul, and this is a picture of me when I was 6. Not long after this picture was taken, I read the book Grinny by Nicholas Fisk, which is a story of some kids who think their grandmother may be an alien. It was the first book I ever read that was written as a journal with diary entries, and it was also the first book that I ever read that introduced an idea without explaining it first, which is something we love to do in roguelikes. I thumbed back through all the pages to find what the author was talking about, but it turned out the idea was going to be explained later. This was suspense. And God, you don't have to explain everything all at the start, all at once. Stories and narrative are not programming. You are not loading in all your DLLs, your libraries, your references up front. Now, did I say stories, or did I say writing, or is this a narrative talk? Well, what are we talking about here? What exactly is the difference? Well, my name is Paul, and this is a picture of me when I was 6 or thereabouts. Not soon after, I played the video game Captain Blood, which was the first game to make me cry. As a spacefaring starship captain, I could pick up aliens from different planets and take them to others, and I took a young alien from one planet to another and release him without realizing that the second planet had no atmosphere and he couldn't breathe. In 2 or 3 lines of dialogue, he told me that he was suffocating and that he was scared and that he missed his parents so much, and then he died. It was a clear and concise example of consequence, of organically discovering a result through gameplay, one result of so many possibilities. No more writing than that was necessary. I restarted the game and I picked him up again and I took him to a different planet, and he talked to me about how excited he was and how he was having a great time. Now, this happened more than 35 years ago. And I still remember it, because good narrative doesn't have to be wordy or complex or elaborate. In fact, particularly in a roguelike context, I think less may often be more. Now, my name is Paul, and I'm about to share a collage of some of my favorite scene-setting roguelike narrative. And the thing is, if I gave 100 of you right now about 100 guesses each as to what game I'm about to introduce, I don't actually think any of you would get it. No, I don't think you would. But do you see what I'm doing? This is suspense. What I'm going to show you now is a few mid-level narrative interstitials from the roguelike bullet hell shooter Nuclear Throne. And I love these. I think they're sassy single lines that you can miss if you look away, but they have some ineffable quality that hints at the wider world or your character's feelings or something like this. And in a fast-paced roguelike shooter, this is just the right amount of extra world building for me. Thank you very much. They don't compromise tone or pacing. They don't waste your time. They don't keep you waiting any longer than my name is Paul. And this is a picture of me when I was 36. And when a feature that I wrote about the video game Stardew Valley was about to go so viral that people will still talk about it today. I wrote about my experience and about how my life and how these things sometimes paralleled one another. My experience in the game, my real life unfolding in front of me. And Stardew Valley, a game with some roguelike elements, has a narrative that is actually really, really loose, in which the player can progress relationships and narrative threads and discover secrets in various different orders and often in parallel. Conversations are relatively short. Oh, hey, we like that. And the game's fan base have come up with plenty of interpretations and extrapolations over the last decade or so, in no small part because of what NPCs don't say, as well as what they do say. I myself wove ideas about the game and my life together, in part because the fabric of Stardew Valley's narrative is loose, like yarn, with holes big enough for you to thread all sorts of things through. Intentional or not, this is good. My name is Paul, and this is a picture of me when I was writing this middle paragraph, which I have to tell you, I did not write in the middle of this talk. I did not write the start of this talk at the start or the end at the end. I put them there later. Just like when I wrote my non-linear feature about Stardew Valley, I lifted up pieces of writing and moved them around. I wrote about what I wanted to when I wanted to, and I stitched it together later. I did not know what order it would all go in, nor how it would end when I started it. But I knew what was as important as that order was the bigger picture that it would all create. I frequently tell budding writers that not knowing your ending when you start or everything you want to say is normal and is okay. You discover much of this in the process. My name is Paul, and this is a picture of me when I was drafting the next paragraph that I'm reading now. You see, different times, different places, same end result. My name is Paul, and this is a picture of me when I was working on the video game Pacific Drive. I had no idea how to start. So I began with sassy little descriptions of tiny items in the game that had minimal narrative relevance and that I had no guarantee anyone would ever read. I worked with my terrific narrative lead, Carrie, who had built a whole timeline with an alternate history and devised characters and an explanation of the game's strange core mechanic. But nobody playing the game knows what I wrote first, and that's okay, nor which parts I redrafted or cut or edited after feedback or rewrote to make them consistent with newer things that I'd just written, or with changes made by other members of the team to the game's ever-developing mechanics. It's absolutely okay that I wrote this way, with iteration and with restructuring and starting in essentially a random place, because I think one of the worst things you can do as a writer is believe you have to start at the start. The start is where people get stuck. I looked at the world that Carrie was building, and much as when I've worked on collaborative tabletop RPGs and source books, I tried to find appropriate complementary ways to add to it, to explain strange game mechanics that were sometimes still in process during development. For example, why is there gasoline everywhere in Pacific Drive. Mechanically, that's an ideal resource for a driver. It is useful. I decided that the constant breakdown of the world's infrastructure caused by the game's ever-shifting world would make an essential power source, a portable power source like fuel, an essential resource. Or I lampshaded the fact that there are almost no animals in the game, and there wasn't time to really add anything like that. Or I built in bits of lore where I imagined what it was like for people just trying to live their lives in the ever-rearranging reality of the Olympic exclusion zone, including everyday things like getting lost, resenting their work, seeing colleagues die, playing practical jokes, and even falling in love. I was well aware that the point of Pacific Drive isn't to read lore, so I assumed players largely wouldn't, or would at random. And while there is consistency and repetition across much of what I wrote, I wanted to make things bite-sized, digestible, and non-essential. They were a complement to the gameplay. Rewards, Easter eggs for the more curious players, but the writing's not there to take the limelight, and it's certainly not something for less interested players to resent. It's not supposed to be an obstacle to enjoying the game's mechanics. My name is Paul, and here is a picture of a drum kit, which is the first instrument that I learned how to play a long time ago now. The thing with a drum beat is it's as much about what and when you don't play as what and when you do. It's about space, it's about timing, and it's about appropriateness. I love Nuclear Throne's sassy one-liners, and if Nuclear Throne is tight, bouncy lounge jazz or something like that, you do not need a thunderous rock drummer flipping out in the background. It's not appropriate. Pacific Drive needed appropriate writing from me to complement but not ruin the fantastic work that Carrie and everybody else on the team was doing. But I thought instead to reward players who wanted to futz around, to poke at things, to do things like turn on the game's fax machine and read a strange brief story or odd message. The fax machine, by the way, essentially works like a shuffled deck of cards, producing one unique result per use. Or I wanted to connect with the kind of player who is going to explore and poke around, who enjoys going off the beaten track, so that I could give that kind of player reinforcing rewards that would encourage more of that and give them even more weird collectible tidbits. I actually play several instruments, and I like fiddling around with music, and I like knowing how things are made, including other stuff I love, movies, novels, games, all sorts. And this is because making things, and I hope you know this, or maybe you're going to learn this, making things is mostly a process. And studying people's process is as important as studying the end result. Writers can learn from filmmakers and musicians and designers and everyone else, because so much that is about creativity and problem solving contains mirrors and parallels. And after a while, you might start to ask, hey, what exactly is the difference? My name is Paul, and this is my favorite book, which is Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five, which I discovered when I was 26. Either as a result of alien abduction, or PTSD, or some mental episode, the protagonist becomes unstuck in time and finds he is constantly visiting different moments in his life. Suddenly deep in the past or far in the future, life as a whole still makes sense as a collection of moments. But outside of its linearity, there are other connections. Different moments or experiences that are sometimes years apart mirror or parallel or reinforce one another. And they suddenly gain new clarity or context when they're compared side by side. The story doesn't unfold in a linear fashion, and it doesn't need to. I once went to the Kurt Vonnegut Museum in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I looked at Kurt Vonnegut's various many drafts of Slaughterhouse-Five, which were as valuable as studying the finished book itself. Roguelike games are so often about repetition and reinforcement and mirroring and parallels, but also about new moments of novelty, of exclusivity, of finding something new that joins a bigger picture, perhaps helping it to make more sense, to give it clarity. And players may discover and compare these different elements in all kinds of orders. So why would you feel compelled to author them in any order or execute them in any order or consider a linear narrative as something normal or something essential or something necessary? A lot of players love to figure stuff out, to experiment, particularly roguelike players. Our incredibly talented design director, Seth, wanted us to build a game that encouraged players to experiment, to learn and discover things rather than simply direct them and explain everything up front. I mean, explain everything up front mechanically, not narratively. But I also mean explain everything up front narratively and not mechanically. Although, hey, what exactly is the difference? Well, another favorite book of mine is Vladimir Nabokov's Pale Fire, which begins with a 999-line masterwork poem in rhyming couplets, followed by the poem's apparent analysis. I recently saw a Blue Sky post by someone asking how a poem with an odd number of lines can be in couplets. And congratulations, poster, you're a winner. Pale Fire is all about the realization that you cannot trust its narrator, that something here is wrong. And at a certain point in the book, I had to suddenly thumb backward to check something as it hit me. I was being lied to, hyperlinking my way back and forth through the text to check things like a Final Fantasy book. I discovered this for myself, which is good. I love to figure stuff out. More recently, I read the infamous House of Leaves, which has several overlapping and perhaps competing narratives. Apparently, I read it wrong by just reading all of them in a linear order. Whoops. But linear narrative was never really linear anyway. Flashbacks in television shows, prequels in film series, even new additions to a series by different contributors show us that actually narrative exploration and development has rarely, if ever, been a linear experience. And this is great news for roguelike developers. You don't have to tell a story or let it unfold in a linear fashion for it to make sense. You don't even need to tell the whole story. Ask any archaeologist if we have a complete picture of past events, or if we're constantly adding to and reevaluating history as we make new discoveries. And can we still get the gist of something if we don't have every single beat spelled out for us? Sure, we can. My name is Paul, and when I began my contributions to the fairly roguelike Pacific Drive, which is mostly an awful lot of written text and lore, one of my biggest influences was the not very roguelike Horizon Zero Dawn. While the main plot of this game is linear, the mostly open world allows players to discover and experience side quests and collectible lore in just about any order. The side quests and lore add to the world. They fill it out without overwhelming the main plot or offering more than clues as to the overarching mystery. They are appropriate. I'd compare it to assembling a jigsaw puzzle of pleasantly bite-sized parts, gradually building or reconstructing an image of a world that, even if you never complete it, increasingly makes sense as you step back and look at the larger picture, like archaeology, because, hey, what exactly is the difference? I didn't expect players to read everything they found in Pacific Drive, to remember everything they read, or even necessarily be that interested. But because I personally did enjoy finding all the lore hidden around Horizon Zero Dawn, I decided I should also follow its example and keep things short, snappy, relevant, and varied, as well as hopefully just worth finding. So, oh no, I've had a limited amount of time for this talk, for this big topic. So consider all of this your opening cutscene. I've only partly touched on video games and my work in them because, to be honest, that's only part of what I do. And it's only part of my influence as a writer. Hopefully, I've made it clear that I draw on many influences, which I think is essential to any writer's creative process or any creative's process, as well as making it clear that I often start wherever I want to with whatever works best, and I build out and I adapt and iterate. The point of this talk isn't to give you answers, sorry, or a specific direction for how you write or develop or design or experiment explain things to you or tell you what to do or give you an optimal build, because what matters more is discovering and iterating that for yourself in your own project and finding out what is appropriate. Instead, I hope I've given you a bunch of things to consider or to research. To anyone in games or anything creative, the answer to, hey, what exactly is the difference, should be, hey, let's find out. One final thing. My name is Paul, and this talk was actually written to be broken down, rearranged, and reassembled so it could be presented in several different orders to build the same bigger picture, where it would remain coherent and thematically appropriate. I did my first ever piece of creative writing when, guess, I was 6. And much as I did then, I still work with pens and paper, as well as with keyboards and software. The first things I wrote for Pacific Drive was scribbled on a notepad in a neighborhood cafe before being scratched out and annotated. Carrie and I were fortunate enough to be nominated for a prestigious Nebula Award. The first ever Nebula Award went to a book called June. And everything I've mentioned in this talk has led me to where I am now as a writer, narrative designer, storyteller, whatever. You are free to take anything or nothing from this talk, add it to your own work, and regardless, I guarantee whatever you create and however you create it will be as unique and as eclectic as your own personal collection of influences already is. And you should be constantly adding to that collection of influences. I encourage you to draw greedily upon anything and everything. Thank you so much for your time. I think we've got some space for 1 or 2 questions, so I'm ready for them.
Hello. Yeah, we've got space for plenty of questions. So if anyone has more questions, please put them on the question wall, and I'll take a look at those. We do have a question here first. It says, for the speaker with the blue hair speaking about narrative, what was your name again?
My full name is Paul Andrew Dean. So you get
Okay,
you see,
gotcha.
you
Yeah,
unlock the progression by repeatedly doing the
right.
thing, and now we
Okay,
have a little more information.
that's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, it's an Easter egg. That's fun. Great. Thank you so much. I really House of Leaves is maybe my favorite book, and then I think Name of the Rose is second to that. So talk was definitely relevant to me, and I'll need to take a look at a lot of these works that you mentioned.
Well, Name of the Rose is, you may know, it's a big influence on the game Pentiment, which was a game that Josh Scheuer, I don't think I'm spoiling anything. When I first met Josh 10 years ago now, he said he'd wanted to make that game for years before he did. It's super interesting to know and follow Josh's work because he, as a games designer, frequently talks about cycling, about film, about he's got a lot of different hobbies, and all of this stuff actually bleeds into his games in different ways. And I think it's super healthy for all games people to have non-games hobbies.
Yeah, absolutely. And some people are asking questions about if you take inspiration from nonlinear or other art forms, other parts of life, and it sounds like very much yes.
I think so, yes. I can't help but enjoy a lot of narratives where time gets kind of fudged up. Like there's a German Netflix show called Dark, which is a good example of that. But also, like recently, Andor was a big hit. I mentioned Wicked
Mm,
in this talk, and those are both people actually inserting a piece of work between two others, which is a kind of a weird narrative challenge. And it feels
yeah.
like it would be a constraint, but actually it gives you amazing possibilities.
Yeah, I recently watched the second season of The Rehearsal, and it definitely feels like that's messing with narrative expectations as well.
I'd like to
And
try that. I
something
haven't
that
tried that yet.
oh, I recommend it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I'm just looking at we've got a lot of questions here now on the
Oh
question
boy.
wall. Okay. Okay, here, how about this one? What's the best way to add linear narrative structure to the non-linear snippets you stumble across? How do you
Um,
resolve a plot at the end?
I think that's a good question. I think the answer might be this might be cheating. It might be some amount of gating. I think it's
Mm,
reasonable at the start of a lot of context to still give people like an introductory section, which can be mixed with, something that tutorializes. And it may be that you have ultimate endpoint that you're reaching, and certainly like Pacific Drive's plot does this. I guess to some degree, like Horizon Zero Dawn does this. A lot of things do this, but that gives you all this wiggle room in the middle. And if you have these 2 points, there's 100 different ways you can reach them. But I don't think it necessarily hurts to give yourself a universal sort of start point and an introduction to some mechanics there and some key characters or key ideas. There's a sort of a how long is a piece of string thing of like, well, how much do you want to hold people's hands, and at which point do you let them loose into the world or into the game mechanics? And that's kind of up to you, I think, and how punishing or how helpful you want to be. And I don't know if there's a right answer for that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That kind of segues well into, I think, where's going to be our last question here. A lot has been said about when procedurality should or shouldn't be used. Hilext has asked, what are some things that don't work, maybe well or as well, when they're nonlinear?
That's a good question, because I want to say like maybe almost anything can be thrown into the tombola and spun around, but maybe not.
Sure.
I'm immediately putting myself in a niche here or getting super specific, but I wouldn't advise mixing up, if you're recording with voice actors, any voice audio or anything like that. There is so much about how someone speaks. I was very lucky. I worked with Carrie, who's not only a really good writer, but she's a really good voice director and caster. There's so much inflection, and there's so much that if you chopped up even a robot voice and rearranged things, I don't think that would work very well. That is the first thing that comes to mind, which I don't know that's immediately sort of a more specific thing. I don't know. I'd have to think on that some more to try and come up with some other examples, but it feels kind of lazy. But something that might be very organic like that is very human, is very hard to slice up.
Yeah, but I could imagine that getting an uncanny valley element there, if that's what you're going
Yeah.
for, it could totally be.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, never worry about being too niche at Roguelike Celebrations. Kind of, this is a good place to be niche and specific.
Thank you.
And if
Okay.
people want to continue this discussion, the breakout room is going to be in the dressing room. But thank you so much for that wonderful talk, Paul. I really enjoyed that. Gave me a lot of cool art that I'm going to have to look at later.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm gonna hang about. I'm gonna hang about for the rest of the afternoon or evening. So yeah, please prod me if you'd like to.
Yeah, I think people are definitely going to take the doing voice acting non-linearly as a challenge now. That's definitely how I immediately took it.
It's gonna drive some
So we'll
voice
see.
actors insane, but sure.
Yeah, that's fair.